He took a fake girlfriend for his ex's engagement, only to prove he had moved on. But one dance under the white lights changed everything. What began as revenge turned into a heart-melting story of true love, where an ordinary girl showed a billionaire that love is not about status or beauty, it's about kindness, courage, and a pure heart. Stephen Blake was only 33, yet his name already echoed in every boardroom, whispered with both respect and fear. He had built empires with the sharpness of his mind, closed deals with a single glance, and carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who needed nothing from the world. But beneath the tailored suits and cold eyes, there lived a wound he carried in silence. Her name was Julia. Years ago, Julia had been his world. She had been the woman who laughed at his late-night jokes, who promised she'd stand by him not because of his money, but because of his heart. She once whispered forever into his ear, making him believe he had finally found home. But forever had ended too soon. One morning, she simply walked away. No goodbye, no second thought, just silence where her love used to be. Stephen remembered the night he had gone to her apartment, roses in hand, planning to propose. Instead, he found an empty room, her ring left on the counter like a cruel farewell. His chest tightened even now, years later, as the memory clawed back to life. He had rebuilt himself after that. Not with love, but with walls. Walls so high that no woman could climb them. Walls so cold that no warmth could melt them. Love? He told himself it was a weakness. Commitment? A lie people told each other until they grew tired. So he buried the man who once believed, replacing him with the ruthless CEO the world admired and feared. But fate is cruel. It always circles back. And one crisp evening, an envelope arrived at his office. A golden invitation, heavy with arrogance. When he opened it, his jaw clenched. The names sparkled in silver ink. Julia Adams and Charles Wren, engagement celebration. His ex, the woman who broke him, and she wanted him there. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the invitation for a long time. His office felt colder, quieter. Why send this to him? Why now? He knew the answer. Julia wanted to show him she had moved on, that she had chosen another man over him, that he was just a chapter she had closed. It wasn't about sharing her joy. It was about flaunting it in his face. Stephen's lips curved into a bitter smile. She still wanted his attention. She still wanted his reaction. Two can play this game, he muttered, his voice low, almost dangerous. If Julia thought he would show up alone, broken and humiliated, she was wrong. He would walk into that ballroom with someone so radiant, so breathtaking, that Julia's victory would turn into her greatest regret. His chest tightened again, but this time not with pain, rather with anticipation. The game had begun, and Stephen Blake never lost. Bella Cora was 25, a girl with gentle eyes and a soul too kind for the cruel world around her. She worked in a modest event planning office, arranging flowers, setting tables, and writing schedules that no one ever praised her for. Her salary was small, her apartment tiny, but she carried something rare, an honest smile. When she laughed, people felt lighter. When she walked into a room, even strangers felt a warmth that money couldn't buy. She wasn't rich, she wasn't famous. She didn't belong to the glittering world of billionaires. But perhaps that was her magic. She was real in a world full of masks. One late afternoon, fate pushed her into Stephen Blake's path. He had hired her office to organize part of his company's gala. Bella had been the one carrying notes, quietly checking details, making sure nothing was forgotten. Stephen noticed her not because of her dress. It was simple, almost plain. Not because of makeup, she wore almost none. He noticed her because of her smile. It wasn't a smile meant to impress. It wasn't painted on for attention. It was real, like sunlight breaking through heavy clouds. For a man like Stephen, who had seen the coldest faces of society, her warmth was disarming. When the business discussion ended, he found himself staring at her longer than necessary. She looked up, confused by his silence. "Is something wrong, sir?" she asked softly. That's when the thought struck him, a bold, reckless idea. What if she could be the one? Not forever, just one night, just enough to make Julia choke on regret. He leaned closer, his eyes sharper than ever, and said the unthinkable. "Bella, I need you to be my girlfriend, for one night, just one event." Bella froze. Had she heard him correctly? Her lips parted, but no words came out. Pretend to be his girlfriend? The billionaire CEO who ruled boardrooms like a king? It sounded insane. She wasn't from his world. She wasn't even dressed for his world. Her chest tightened. Her first thought was to say no. But his eyes, those steady, stormy eyes, they didn't just command. They held something else. Something almost broken. She swallowed hard. "Why me?" she whispered. Stephen's jaw clenched, and for a moment his walls slipped. "Because you're not like them. You're real. And that's what I need." Her heart pounded. She didn't understand his world of wealth, but she understood loneliness. And something in his voice told her he wasn't just asking for a favor, he was asking for rescue. Still, fear ran through her. What if she embarrassed him? What if she wasn't enough? But curiosity was stronger than fear. After a long silence, Bella finally nodded. "All right, Mr. Blake, I'll do it." Stephen's lips curved in the faintest smile, the kind that carried danger and promise all at once. "You won't regret this, Bella." She forced a nervous laugh. "I hope you won't regret it either." Little did she know this one night would change her life, not because of luxury, not because of revenge, but because sometimes fate hides love in the most unexpected agreements. The ballroom glowed like a dream. Crystal chandeliers rained golden light from the ceiling, polished floors reflected every shimmer, and the gentle notes of a violin floated in the air like whispers of old love songs. Laughter rose and fell, champagne glasses clinked, and everywhere the scent of roses mingled with expensive perfume. It was the kind of room where appearances mattered more than truth. And tonight all eyes were waiting for Julia, the bride-to-be. But instead the room fell silent when the doors opened. Stephen Blake walked in, tall, striking, every inch the powerful CEO. His presence filled the room like a storm no one dared ignore. His dark suit was cut to perfection, his stride confident, unhurried. Every head turned, every whisper died. But the true shock came from the woman holding his hand, Bella. She wore an ivory dress Stephen had chosen himself, the fabric flowing like liquid light around her. It wasn't the kind of dress she had ever imagined herself in, too fine, too perfect. Yet somehow, it belonged to her now. Her hair fell in soft waves, her cheeks glowed faintly pink, and her nervousness only made her more enchanting. She didn't look like a woman pretending. She looked like a woman who belonged by his side. The crowd stirred, whispers rising like waves. "Who is she?" "She's stunning." Stephen Blake finally brought someone? Bella's heart pounded so loud she feared others could hear it. Her hand trembled in his, but Stephen's grip was steady, firm, reassuring. At the far end of the room, Julia's laughter cracked. Her smile froze, her eyes widened, and for the first time in years, she didn't look in control. Stephen saw it. Oh, he saw it clearly, and a dark satisfaction flickered in his chest. But he leaned down, his lips brushing close to Bella's ear, his voice smooth and commanding. "Tonight you're mine. Just follow my lead." Bella's breath caught, the warmth of his words, the nearness of his presence. It sent a shiver through her. She reminded herself, it's only an act, just one night, just pretend. Yet when his hand pressed gently against the small of her back, guiding her forward, it didn't feel like pretending. It felt dangerously real. She forced a smile, even as her pulse raced. She had promised herself she wouldn't lose control. But standing beside Stephen, she felt as if the world was watching them. Not Julia, not the chandeliers, not the champagne towers, just them. Every step deeper into the ballroom felt like walking into another life. And as eyes followed them, Bella's cheeks warmed with a mix of fear and wonder. Stephen glanced down at her, his expression unreadable, but his gaze lingered as though he had forgotten why she was even there. For the first time in years, the billionaire wasn't walking into a party alone. And for the first time in her life, Bella was stepping into a spotlight she never imagined she would touch. The violin changed its tune, slipping into a slow, aching melody that seemed to pull every heart into its rhythm. The crowd hushed. The crowd hushed, sensing something about to unfold. Stephen Blake extended his hand toward Bella. The gesture was firm, confident, but his eyes, they held something softer, almost vulnerable. "Dance with me," he murmured. Bella hesitated. Her palms were damp, her pulse racing wildly, dancing in the center of the ballroom, with everyone staring, with Julia's sharp eyes burning holes into her. She wanted to run, but she saw the calm steadiness in Stephen's face. He leaned closer, his voice low, warm, almost protective. "Trust me." Her breath caught. Something inside her loosened. Slowly, she placed her trembling hand in his. The moment their hands touched, the world dimmed. He led her to the center, and whispers rippled through the room. As the music swelled, Stephen placed his other hand at her waist. The touch was protective, claiming, as though shielding her from the world. Her first steps faltered, but he guided her gently, effortlessly, until her movements matched his, and suddenly they were in rhythm. It was as if they had danced together 1,000 times before. Every spin flowed like water. Every turn was seamless. Every breath seemed to belong to one another. Bella lifted her eyes, meeting his. What she saw there stole her breath. Not coldness, not calculation, but warmth, burning, deep, unguarded. Her nervousness melted away. For the first time, she wasn't acting. The ballroom faded. The glittering chandeliers, the watching eyes, even the sting of Julia's jealousy disappeared. There was only Stephen. And Stephen, he was no longer playing a game. He had intended this dance to be a weapon, a way to remind Julia of what she lost. But as he gazed into Bella's eyes, he forgot Julia even existed. Every step pulled him deeper into something he thought he had buried long ago. At the edge of the room, Julia's face twisted, her smile cracking into a mask of rage. She couldn't stand it. The way Stephen's hand fit around Bella's waist, the way his eyes never left hers, as if no one else existed. But Stephen didn't notice her. He was lost. Lost in the way Bella's breath quickened when he pulled her closer, lost in the faint blush that spread across her cheeks when his lips brushed near her temple. Bella's heart raced so hard she thought it might break through her chest. This wasn't pretend anymore. This wasn't a role she could walk away from when the music stopped. This was real. Too real. Their bodies moved as one, gliding across the polished floor like they had been created only for each other. Every eye in the room was fixed on them, but Stephen and Bella didn't see it. By the time the final note lingered in the air, silence filled the room for a heartbeat. Then applause thundered, echoing against the high ceilings. The crowd clapped, but Stephen and Bella barely heard it. Their breaths were uneven, their hearts pounding in the same wild rhythm. He held her close, unwilling to let go. His gaze locked on hers as though she was the only truth in a room built on lies. And she, trembling in his arms, knew the same truth. Something had changed forever in that single dance. The ballroom still buzzed with music and chatter, but Stephen and Bella slipped away from the glittering crowd. The noise faded behind them as they stepped into a quiet hallway lit only by soft golden sconces. The silence between them was heavy, filled with everything they hadn't said during the dance. Bella clutched her hands together, her chest rising and falling too fast. Her heart was still beating to the rhythm of the violin. She wanted to believe it was only the magic of the moment, but deep down she knew better. Finally, she found her voice, though it trembled as it left her lips. "Stephen, I know this was just pretend, a game, a role you asked me to play." She lifted her gaze, her eyes shimmering under the dim light. "But for me, it didn't feel fake." Her words hung in the air, fragile, vulnerable, waiting to be broken. Stephen, the man who commanded boardrooms with iron certainty, suddenly looked undone. His face, usually guarded like stone, softened. The walls he had spent years building around his heart cracked. He stepped closer, his hand rising almost unconsciously to brush a loose strand of hair from her cheek. His fingers lingered, warm against her skin, as though afraid she would vanish if he let go. "Bella!" His voice was rough, uneven, like he was fighting himself. "When I asked you to come with me, I thought it was about Julia. I thought I wanted revenge, wanted her to see me happy so she would regret leaving." He paused, his jaw tightening, his eyes burning into hers. "But the truth is, somewhere between walking in with you and holding you in that dance, Julia disappeared." Bella's breath caught. She couldn't move, couldn't speak. Stephen's hand dropped, but only so he could take hers. His grip was strong, almost desperate. "You stole the spotlight, Bella. Not just tonight. You stole me." Her lips parted, her eyes wide with shock, but the tears forming there were not from fear. They were from a joy she didn't understand yet. No one had ever looked at her like this. No one had ever spoken to her as if she mattered more than glitter, more than wealth, more than pride. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The shadows wrapped around them like a secret, hiding them from the world, giving them a space where only truth existed. Bella whispered, almost afraid of breaking the fragile magic. "Stephen, are you sure?" He leaned closer, his forehead almost touching hers, his voice low but steady. "For the first time in years, I feel alive. For the first time, I feel whole. And it's because of you." Her heart swelled, her throat tightening as emotion threatened to spill over. In that quiet hallway, away from the eyes of the world, the billionaire who once believed love was dead confessed the one thing he never thought he would again. He wanted more. Bella's tears slipped free, glistening as she smiled through them. And in that moment, without a kiss, without promises, they both knew something unspoken. This was no longer pretend. Julia had been circling the room all evening, her laughter louder than necessary, her smiles too sharp to be real. She had expected Stephen to arrive alone, expected him to stand at the edges of the celebration, cold and distant, secretly wounded by her happiness. But when she finally gathered the courage to approach him, what she found froze her steps. Stephen wasn't standing alone. He was holding Bella's hand, firmly, proudly, as though it was the most natural thing in the world. Julia's confident stride faltered. She forced her lips into a smile, but her eyes betrayed her. "Stephen," she said sweetly, her voice carrying a hint of mockery, "I'm glad you came. I hope you're doing well." Stephen turned slowly, his gaze steady, calm, but his hand never left Bella's. In fact, his thumb brushed gently against Bella's fingers, reassuring her, grounding her. "Julia," he replied, his tone even but laced with a quiet finality. "Thank you for inviting me, but tonight I realized something." The room seemed to still, curious ears leaning closer. "I never lost anything," Stephen continued, his eyes softening as he glanced at Bella. "I was just waiting for her." The words cut sharper than any blade. Julia's smile stiffened, the false light in her eyes dimming. For the first time, she was the one left standing in silence, tasting regret on her tongue. Bella's cheeks burned crimson, her heart racing as Stephen's words sank in. Tears shimmered in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming swell of something she never thought she'd find: belonging. She looked at him, her lips trembling, and whispered so only he could hear, "Stephen." But he squeezed her hand tighter as if answering without words. That night, Stephen Blake, the man once defined by loss and guarded by walls, walked out of that glittering engagement, not with revenge in his heart, but with love. Real love. The fake girlfriend he thought he had hired had become the woman who reminded him of something far greater than victory. That love isn't about appearances. It isn't about showing the world you've won. It's about finding someone whose soul fits with yours, even when the world doesn't understand it. And Bella, ordinary soft-hearted Bella, proved something to everyone watching that night. She didn't have wealth. She didn't have status. She didn't need either. Her kindness, her honesty, her quiet strength outshone every diamond in that room. The chandeliers sparkled, the champagne flowed, but the true light of the night came from the way Stephen looked at Bella. As though she was his future, his beginning, and his redemption all in one. Julia turned away, her pride wounded, but perhaps even she understood now. What she lost wasn't a billionaire. What she lost was a man capable of the kind of love she never valued. Stephen and Bella left hand in hand, stepping into the cool night air, leaving behind the noise, the glitter, the envy. Neither needed to say much because sometimes the most powerful promises are spoken through silence and touch. Lesson: don't measure people by their money, beauty, or status. Love doesn't live in glittering halls or grand gestures. It lives in the simple truth of two hearts choosing each other against all odds. And sometimes, the person with the simplest heart can teach us the greatest meaning of love.